Good morning. I'd like to welcome you to Inputs Outputs, KeyCode Media's series giving you short technical tutorials for production, post, and audiovisual industries. I'm your host, Jeff Sengpiel, Chief Technologist here at KeyCode Media. Today, we're going to talk about DaVinci Resolve post-production. This is our annual checkup with the Blackmagic team. DaVinci Resolve product specialist Sean Carlson will be joining me shortly to go over a few of the 200 new improvements. Wait, 200 new improvements? Wow. That have been added to DaVinci Resolve 17, which was released back in November of 2020. We're focusing primarily on new features for editors today, but colorists, don't run away just yet. During our live Q&A, Sean will be able to provide answers to all your questions real time. Steve McKenna from SNS will also be joining us to discuss improving DaVinci Resolve workflows for your media team. We'll put our video engineering hat on in that segment and look at the technical considerations your team should consider when adopting Resolve for collaborative teams. So why are we at KeyCode Media discussing DaVinci Resolve? For over 20 years, KeyCode Media has been installing for broadcast, TV, and cinema, collaborative video team equipment and system solutions that just work. We've been the preferred dealer and systems integrator for installing and supporting large and small-scale Resolve collaborative teams with edit, color, and audio suites, shared storage, and ingest to delivery solutions, glass to glass. Our success in designing, installing, and supporting post-production systems comes from our eclectic and experienced team that successfully installs a broad range of AV, broadcast, and post-production equipment solutions. Combine that with our 24/7 KTC aftermarket support plans and certified training, your team's going to have everything it needs to implement your ideal system with ease. Lastly, KeyCode Education provides industry-recognized certifications. If you work for a qualifying media company, your staff can receive free training with our ETP program. We offer a variety of classes covering DaVinci Resolve and more. So before we get started, let's take a look at the latest features added to DaVinci Resolve 17. What's new? Multicam groups. You can now sync groups on the timeline and convert them to a multicam group. Proxy workflows. New proxy workflows dramatically improve the performance and make it easy to move projects between systems. Some really cool stuff there. Improvements to the edit page. The above-mentioned new proxy workflow dramatically improves performance and makes it easy to move projects between System A to System B, even if System B is at home. Sharing. So timeline and bin files are now easy to share and small enough to email. So we remove the need to export full projects. So with 100 new features and 200 improvements in Resolve 17, there's a lot to go through, including updates to HDR grading, Fairlight Fusion, and much more. We're going to toss out the link to Blackmagic's website that shows all of them at the end in the comments. Okay, let's dive into the demo with Sean. Just a quick reminder, if you have any questions throughout this event, shoot them on over using the YouTube, Facebook chat, or Vimeo chat embedded on our website page. All right, Sean Carlson's joining us from Blackmagic Design to go over what's new in DaVinci Resolve 17. Let's take a look at the first section.
Hi, I'm Sean Carlson, Product Specialist at Blackmagic Design. I'm going to show you some of the new features in Resolve 17 that are specific to editorial, things that you're probably going to have to use an awful lot. I've been asked a lot of questions about editorial in Resolve lately, so I've put this together to kind of help answer a few of those. Let's jump right in. Here I am in my 12K timeline, just tossing 12K media all around. If you don't know, now you know. The inspector here has been expanded, and in the inspector I can look at some of the basic things here in the file panel. And the file panel will show me that it's Blackmagic RAW. It's 12,288 pixels by 6,480 pixels. This might seem unwieldy for most systems to push around, but I just want to kind of show you here that, well, as I play this back, the green GPU and the frame rate are locked, indicating good GPU health and timeline frame rate. And I'm accomplishing that through Resolve's, resolution independence, we'll call it. So in the master settings, I've got a 1080 HD timeline, and image scaling is set to scale to fit mismatched resolution files. And the other thing that I've done is, since these are all Blackmagic Raw from the 12K Ursa Mini Pro, in the color page, under the Camera Raw tab, I've decided that my decode quality only needs to get to 4K, because the highest I ever need to use this is UHD. So 4K is it. And every one of these has been set to 4K from that decode quality. Well, except for this one. I was, kind of showing off that, great. Sometimes when you need the detail, you just need the detail. So now what I have is a pretty responsive 12K, actually. And you see that the green indicates the GPU is happy with me, and 23976, it's locked at the right frame rate. And there's our hero or villain. Attacking or defending himself, carrying a chain. And you can see the incredible saturation going on here in this shot. It's a pretty amazing shot. All right, so the things that I've done here, you can do as well. The object is to try and generate the ability to play this 12K back on even lower end systems. The other thing that's going on here is that I've enabled our optimized media, and you are probably familiar with optimized media, but optimized media has changed. So if I go to the master settings and scroll to where we select our optimized media resolution and format, one of the things that's changed is that now when I generate this optimized media, which works in a frame-based format and is internal to Resolve so that you can use a toggle in the playback menu, well, this is now persistent across every use of this particular clip or this media selected that I've generated it for in my database. Now, Proxy Media is new, and as you see, the Proxy Media resolution is set to half, and Proxy Media format is also set to ProRes 422HQ, while my optimized media is set to a quarter. This is the area that my Proxy and optimized media will go in the working folders. And there's some other defaults in the project file here in the project settings, like these retime process. These are the defaults that I can set for individual retiming and motion estimation. So let's look at a couple of the timelines that I have, because I've done this black magic trickery here with my resolution independence. This media is also 6K from our Pocket Cinema 6K, 6144 by 3456, 16-bit Blackmagic Raw. And I also have the ability to decode based on those settings. And I'm decoding using a clip so that I can override some of this with the ISO. And here, let's say 2000 ISO, 5000 ISO, right? I can adjust this. It was shot at 1250, and that's where I want it again. And this is 6K media and a 1080 timeline, just like the tricks we were pulling with the 12K media. So here we go, Pocket Cinema Camera 6K. Timeline settings are using the project settings. The 4.6K timeline, well, that's full 4.6K right here in a 4.6K native. And you can see the source, it's 4608 by 2592. And if I show you this timeline setting, you'll see that this is custom. I have ticked off the box to use project settings, and it's fully native. It's playing back pretty well, actually. Here in the color page, 25 frames, green GPU health, that's excellent. I just wanted to leave this as a contrast to the other two, just so you could see that, yes, you're not necessarily limited. If you have the right system, it can toss this 4.6K Blackmagic Raw around too. The 12K, I would recommend using these tricks that we described. And I found that the 4.6K is my sweet spot with this system. I like to work at 4.6K in the 4.6K media, but 6K, I work in 1080. If I need to, I can switch my resolution of this timeline at any point and say, you know what I need? I need to deliver in UHD on this timeline. So I'll just do that. And then let's go 100% and let's fit, and you can see that my percentage of viewed screen has now changed. Here's 100%. Switch to the color page. 100%. Excellent. You know, let's save some horsepower for other things. Let's drop it down to 1080, or just tick the box, use project settings, and say OK. You see when I fit to the viewer now, 88%, because I'm only in 1080. And the decode quality, I dropped it in half as well.
All right, so 12K in the timeline. Just a word to all you folks out there who are thinking you just want to run out and do that. You might want to think about what your storage pipeline is behind that before you just jump in. We're more than happy to sell you storage. Steve McKenna will be on a little later. He'll more than happy to sell you storage. But the good thing is, because the preferences are so flexible, you don't have to be an engineer to go in and find out where you need to change things on the fly. I've known about certain settings inside of Resolve for a long time, but now it seems that they've kind of opened them up for everybody to find them. So no one has to pick up the phone and call me. So that this sounds like a kind of a great deal here. Was this the result of requests from end users?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, a lot of people have come to Resolve from a finishing environment, and you know, we're known in the finishing industry. Everyone goes into these expensive, quiet, dark sessions, and you know, they polish the final touches on their product, and then it goes to delivery. Well, those systems are typically very well configured with, you know, GPUs, multi-core CPUs, etc., a lot of RAM, and you know, not everyone who comes at Resolve nowadays, or at least not everyone who has you know, recently been introduced to Resolve, has a system that can properly handle that. So I think in terms of editorial, a lot of questions have come my way, and to that end, I've had to, you know, come up with a few tips for people to you know, to help with creative or offline editorial stage. And often these days, because it makes sense, people are doing that with raw media. And there were a number of productions that we've supported that have done, you know, raw straight to editorial, bypassing everything else, because it was just not necessary, you know, with the right kind of configuration. And, you know, when we're talking about a production, typically they have a line item list in the budget that says, this is our editorial system, or this is the cost of our editorial system. And it's pretty easy to just, you know, gear up to make that work. But for most everyone else who is just trying to cut at home, and of course, you know, Resolve offers a free version, so there's a number of users out there that are just going to try and work in Resolve and editorial on their existing systems. So with these settings, essentially in the preferences that I was discussing, you can customize it slightly. You can find the methods of tweaking Resolve just a little bit more, so that it has you know, a better opportunity to play with the 12K media if you know, for some reason you find yourself on that project. But of course, this works just the same with, you know, the 4K, 6K media, any other camera media that you're looking for in particular. Resolve is resolution independent, so we can customize the timeline. I can lower the resolution while not lowering the resolution of the media. I didn't have to generate proxies in order to do that. While of course we have just added that feature, you know, for other compatibility's sake. This just, you know, gives us even more options for working on more systems.
And when you combine that with an output display transform, or, you know, basically an editing LUT, you can have a functional system, because that's the one thing people also need to be aware of. You're going to have to change the look if it's log color. it's not going to look right to everybody, and people are going to be like, "Is it supposed to look like that?"
Yeah, I mean, I thought they shot on a great camera, right? Why does it look so flat? Is the question everyone gets. Well, in fact, in Resolve, it's pretty simple to do that, and especially if you're talking about a Resolve color managed project, because you can simply define the input transform space, the timeline or working space, the output space, if you wanted to get that custom on your color management settings. We have a new pull down menu that offers some presets. So that should make it pretty easy to find the kind of workflow you're looking for. And especially when we're talking about working with the Blackmagic RAW, which when shot in camera default, or rather when interpreted in camera default mode, it will look very flat, very, lower contrast and lower saturation. But in, color managed workflows, well, we know that that came from our camera. We've automatically applied essentially the film gamma, and we've transformed to our timeline space, whatever working space you have. So it's going to look much better than just a standard flat log. I mean, you probably won't have to work with an edit LUT at that point, but of course you certainly can. It's pretty simple to add them.
Definitely, and especially if you paid a colorist to give you one, you want to use it. Makes everybody happy.
Yeah. Okay, in this segment, I want to talk about the methods that we can collaborate with other Resolve users. In the project manager, we can export a project, export it with stills and LUTs attached, export a project archive. And what's new in project archive, actually, is right here, Wednesday demo DRA. Let's just put it in this desktop area. New folder. Click Save. Now, I have a choice. I can take all of my media, all the render cache that I've prepared, or just my proxy media. And this is a really great option, in fact, if you just wanted to export something to maybe, take home and finish from work, but you don't want to take the raw media files, or maybe you already have the raw media files somewhere, or maybe you have them uploading to another service you're going to access later, but in the meantime you want to be able to work with the proxy media that you've generated. So this is a very quick method of doing that. You can just export the DaVinci Resolve archive, and then I'll just say okay. Right click in here, let me just go to list mode, and then we'll say restore project archive. Now that's where I can choose to restore this DRA or any other. And if we go to the desktop, I have trim timeline. I've already brought this one in. This is how you restore a .dra. Now, exports, of whole DRPs and DRAs are great, and they existed before 17. So let's close this and show you some of the new ways that we do this in Resolve 17. With this timeline right here of 6K media, including everything I've done, the adjustment layer with the effects, the speed change, the annotations, I just want to export this timeline. So let's do that. In fact, Smart Bins, Timelines, it's the 6K Timelines menu, Export, Export DRT. So exporting the DRT, we're just going to say it's the BRAW 6K DRT, and we're going to a new folder. And we're going to save that. If I import this timeline into the existing project where I exported it, clearly it doesn't need to import any media, but if I go to a brand new project that's on the same system that has access to that media, it's going to import that media in the DRT. The other thing that I can do here is I can actually export an entire bin. So I'm going to show you that right now. Let's take the export bin that I've created with this timeline and this piece of media. Right click and choose Export Bin. Go to the same place, Exports, and save. Switch projects, and let's import that bin. the export bin. So here it is, the export bin with its own timeline and media. There's the original timeline that I imported. As you can see, everything came back. Everything I exported came back with the import. That includes my annotation marker, my speed change, my adjustment layer, all of my trims. Obviously, these two effects on this clip in the effects panel, tilt, shift, and vignette. They're all here. So it's a very simple way of exchanging timelines with other Resolve editors. It's far more complete than any other exchange format, and it's incredibly useful.
So the DRA, the DaVinci Resolve archive, is that similar to the old days where you would archive a project off of, out of a database, park it, or, sometimes people would do this before they would do an upgrade, park these projects over here, do the upgrade, go forward, and then if they discover they want to roll back, they can pull the archive out and go forward. Is that same sort of functionality there, or a little bit more streamlined?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that it's great to be paranoid about your projects, right? Especially if you're going to be upgrading your database. So one of the methods of preparing for that is to export a DRP, right? A project file. But the project file doesn't contain every piece of media in it. And a DRA is the format where you can actually bundle it together. So you'll have the project, you'll have the media related, and it's a nice method of just packaging something perhaps to send to another location. Like you said, if you're about to upgrade your database, probably a good idea that you put that somewhere. So in that case, you would just export the DRA. The new options in 17 include the ability to send our proxy media as well. So one of the things that I touch on is that I would use this format now if perhaps I just need to take a project archive home and work on it over the weekend, but I don't want to take all the media. So I can generate proxy media for that project, export a DRA, which is a full archive, and then tick the boxes and deselect everything else except proxy media. When I reopen that or import that or restore that to my own Resolve at home, well, I'm going to get everything, and I'm going to have a playback option with the proxy media. I won't need to have the raw media with it.
When you create that proxy media, is it going to bring all of the camera metadata along for the ride as well?
It does, actually. Generated proxies are probably the easiest way to make sure you have absolutely everything, because if it's been brought into Resolve, which is my recommendation in general, bring everything into Resolve first. Even if you're exporting proxies for a third party or another NLE, I would say bring it into Resolve, generate your proxies there. It used to be that you would run a timeline and then you would export individual clips, and it would retain the naming convention, it would retain metadata, etc. In this case, it's much simpler than that, because now we have that built into the project settings. It's just a choice, much like we used optimized media, only now that optimized media in version 17 is actually changed. You generate optimized media once on a particular clip, and it can be found for any new projects that use the same media in your database. So it's database wide. The proxy generation allows for a different format to be generated as proxy media. It also allows for it to be moved as a folder of content to another location, which is really useful. And along with that is the ability to excuse me. Along with that is the ability to import, or rather link to, the third-party generated proxies. Some camera formats might record in RAW and proxy simultaneously, and in those cases you can just move directly to linking to your proxy media and then use it in Resolve, because it's a simple timeline playback option, right? There's two options in the playback menu to enable the optimized media if available and enable proxy media if available. So simple toggle.
Awesome. That sounds like there's going to be some interesting workflows that could pop up in onset and near set kind of production of the dailies workflow. I also want to go back in time and take that version with me and get hours back from making optimized media for another project because someone moved it from one room to another. That would just make my life would have made my life a lot simpler back then.
Yes, of course. Yeah, this is far simpler than the previous version.
So if you're bringing just the timeline, is that just the timeline structure, or does that bring any media with it, or say a bin with it?
Well, in this case, you have two options. You can export the timeline by itself, which is basically just the metadata, and it'll relink to the media that it matches in your project file. And the .drb, which is the bin format, will export the entire bin. So if you have a bin full of content and one or several timelines in that bin that relate to that content, then you export the DRB. It'll import the entire bin to another location, complete with media and the linked project files or linked timeline files.
It also sounds like there's a lot of interesting workflows you could figure out for archive, where hey, you made the entire archive for the project, and then you tell something to, hey, push this up to the cloud, a particular storage bucket up there, and it's kind of a two-step process, and you're just simply done. You don't have to worry about finding media or anything. Sounds like a really great feature.
Yeah, absolutely, and especially as you mentioned, the cloud access. The difficulty, of course, in that workflow is really network speed and access to the original media. If you were to do something with a DRA that includes only the proxy, it's a much lighter weight file. It makes it a lot easier to upload for most people, and also to download, because when you're dealing with accessing that media from a cloud-based storage environment, you're usually going to get charged for your access. So lighter weight proxy means you're using less data. So it's kind of a win-win there.
That it is. All right, let's get into section 2.
Hello again, and thanks for sticking with me. Next thing I want to show you is, while these aren't exactly the newest features in Resolve 17, I think they're pertinent to the editor workflow, and as an editor I find that you'd be doing an awful lot of these things. So let me just start walking you through a few of these again now. So the first is the object removal. Moving to the color page real quick, and then let's go to this shot here so you can break down everything that we did. All right, so here's my shot, and I want to track this. So the easiest way to do this is in two nodes. One, move into the power windows and grab a polygon, and then soften that up. Here, let's zoom into my work area. All right, with a rough selection over here, switch to the tracker. I'm already on the first frame, so I'm going to leave everything selected, and window mode, clip, that defaults to the cloud tracker. Let's just go ahead and track forward. Okay, so it's tracked this. If we play it back, you'll see there it is. All right, let's fit to the edge, and then Option S, right, or right click, say add node, add serial. So I have an add here. I'm looking for the object removal. So again, I'm going to type. Let's put that over here. Oops. Of course, I dropped it the wrong place. So get rid of that and drop it over there. I want to show the mask overlay because I'm going to show you what we're doing with this. We're going to feed that mask that we created in node 1 into node 2, and there's the mask overlay. In fact, if I just play that back, you'll see that's what I was looking at before. There's my mask, and then I want to analyze this. Let it build an internal clean plate from the analysis. And if I show the scene mask overlay, you'll see the region that it's looking for. And then let's just turn that off and play it through. So back to the edit timeline. I'll play it forward this time. There it is, before and after object removal. Okay, so one of the new features in Resolve 17 is that the 3D keyer has been added to the edit page. Hooray! This is really very useful. I've got this clip here.
Just 2 hours ago. Boom, there's this explosion and it surrounded the whole ship.
So he's on a ship here in space, and we need to be able to see the space out that window. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add the 3D keyer. Now, if you're not familiar with the way that I've searched here, I tend not to look in favorites, although I can collapse all of these and I can save my favorites. What I do is I type in the search bar 3D, there's my 3D keyer. With the 3D key over, let's go to the effects panel. Turn on the Open Effects overlay, drag. It's that easy. So with the overlay, what I want to do is I can pick my color space, YUV, HSL, etc. I can adjust the softness. I can choose to despill at that particular saturation level. Matte finesse, this is where we're talking. So let's go from the final composite now to look at the alpha highlight in black and white. So this is my Hicon matte. And I can do things like, clean black and adjust the key in this case. I can denoise. I can, clean white, which is the foreground here that I actually want to hold out from this scene. I'm going to be seeing through this area. This is generating transparency. So then let me move on from this alpha highlight back to final composite, and then we'll start to look at what's going on here. I've enabled disabled the planet background, which you can see underneath. As soon as I enable it, you'll see it show through, and then let's just give it a little,
Just 2 hours ago.
great, there it is.
Boom, there's this explosion and it surrounded the whole ship.
Okay, one more thing that I wanted to show for editors here before I go over some new features, including the interface elements. Face refinement and beauty. Well, if we go back to our effects library, which is open here, and we just start typing, first of all, beauty is available here in the edit page. So I've applied beauty to this. In fact, let's just let's see if we can't give him a better grade since we have him here. Since you can't see what I'm doing because I'm controlling the mini panel, let me just go ahead and do it this way. You can see my trace. I'm just gonna take us out of the shadow here. And let me cool off this temperature somewhat. Let me roll off some of that saturation. All right. Great, that looks a little bit better, right? Cool. So in the edit page, beauty has been applied. It's in the effects, and let's just reset all of this. You have two modes, beauty automatic or beauty advanced. So beauty automatic, let's just zoom into this guy a little bit and try and get a little beauty on. Right, let's toggle that on and off. Let's see how we like that. And the scale of our beauty. All right, Option // there he is. And if smoothing his face was our object, we have accomplished it.
So in talking about the face refinement, I'm just wondering when we can get that, on our output side, because I might need some work there. That seems like a great addition there, especially if you're trying to do a quick finish. The blurs and tracking, that's going to be great, because logos and license plates, that's always the last thing on a lot of shows, especially reality shows. you don't have clearance for that Cadillac logo. It needs to go. Or that face over there, that's not someone who's part of our production. They just happen to be someone in the background. So those additions are going to be a kind of a godsend for folks who are working in the non-scripted space.
Yeah, true. I mean, I find that I've done an awful lot of object removal for tracking points, tape on the ground for marking, and maybe there was a smudge or a mark on a table you didn't notice when you're shooting. Perhaps you had to, like you said, you have to blur those license plate frames, right? The tools within Resolve are obviously, many and varied, and just adding more and more of those tools to the edit page is really going to make it, that much closer to editorial. I know an awful lot of editors would prefer basically not to touch the color page. And in some cases, obviously, they're being asked not to touch the color page. So if these are effects that they can do, whether they're doing this in creative, offline editorial, or if they have to do this in conform, the online editorial, either way, we've offered these tools for several versions. And now a new version of these things is available to the edit page. So it's available to editors. So it's totally within your purview as an editor to, start using these. And of course, we find that we need these a lot.
Well, and also it's helpful to have those tools in the creative process. So, hey, we're talking about a green screen key. That's a simple thing that, yeah, you need to be able to show, because people are going to be looking at it going, why is there a screen of green behind this person? But you don't have to really nail it. The finishing folks are going to take care of that later. And that's one of the great things. The interesting question I've got about the effects library is, can you put third-party plugins there yet?
You'll see third-party plugins. They're organized by Resolve Effects, and they have a new organizational structure in 17. In addition to the fact that, as you look at the organizational structure, you can hover over each one of them to get a preview of how that affects the clip underneath your playhead. So it's a nice way of being able to preview what you've got before you decide upon it. When you take that perfectly pristine video and you throw a JPEG damage over it, you want to see what it's going to look like before what your destroyed video is going to look like after it was pristine. But yeah, I think like you mentioned, the green screen key is something we have to do an awful lot as well. And maybe I didn't expand upon that in my last answer, but apparently, since we have so many methods of pulling a key inside Resolve, there's the qualifier and the color page, whether it's HSL qualifiers, or you can use the 3D key. Well, the 3D keyer is really very useful. It's an additive keyer, and we just kind of select the range with strokes drawn in the viewer. Makes it pretty easy to get a very nice looking key. So even if you are the temp creative offline edit, you're going to pull a very high quality key, but make sure you put a red X or something across the screen for the producer to see, so that you don't think that, this is not final, right? This is going to VFX, but just, we pulled this key for you so that you don't have to guess at what's actually behind the screen. But
Yeah, then of course the notes are going to be, can we get this red X out of there? Yes, we can. Not a problem. Don't worry. It'll be out of there.
exactly.
All right. Thanks, Sean. That answers my questions. However, folks are going to have a lot of other questions, because, that's what folks have. So please join us after we're back from Steve McKenna for the open Q&A, and toss your questions into the chat, and we'll have them all answered for you. All right, next on the agenda is Steve McKenna with Studio Network Solutions. He's going to talk to us about collaboration for Resolve on their platform, and maybe a little bit about the brand new share browser that was released this week. Hey, Steve.
Oh, hey, Jeff. How you been?
I've been pretty good.
Glad to hear it.
What have you and the SNS team been up to when it comes to supporting collaborative workflows inside of DaVinci Resolve?
Oh, so much recently. So it kind of started with as Blackmagic started to bring in some of those collaborative tools to Resolve with just hosting the Resolve database. You had to have the centralized database to unlock those collaborative tools in Resolve Studio. So that was kind of the first step in there. But additionally, we are providing the high performance throughput that Resolve users need. And one thing that's so exciting for me working with Blackmagic on the Resolve product is they share a very similar, let's call it a mantra, I guess, or idea that everything should be kind of in one interface. So we're not having to go bounce between things. And it's been really exciting to see them bring in and democratize a lot of what used to be very, very expensive features across our industry into a very affordable, very scalable product, very similar to the way SNS does. So bringing in Fairlight, for instance, and bringing audio in on top of Fusion and Resolve for the color, all into that one interface is so neat and very much mirrors what we do with our share browser media asset management system, where regardless of what server node or type of storage you're hitting at any given moment, that you have one window to be able to kind of do everything and bounce between on that side. So quite a bit. And we'll talk a little bit more about some of the new things we're doing to integrate with Resolve here in just a minute.
Awesome. And I know SNS started as shared storage for audio folks, so it's kind of following your own story. So let's get the colorist hat on. These teams have been working in higher res formats, OpenEXR, DPX, and a lot of folks have for a long time been using directly connected SAS arrays on the color system itself to try to meet this throughput. How is SNS going to be able to change that approach for high-end finishing editors and colorists?
Yeah, the technology has really caught up now. I feel like a lot of what we're doing for color today is very similar to what we did for HD video editing years ago, or even high track count audio editing. You just couldn't share it before, right? You had to copy the files down, you had to make a duplicate drive, you had to move it. Usually the color assist is there kind of prepping projects for people and things like that. Whereas with Evo and the SNS servers, we now have a purpose-built server called the Evo DPX that leverages SSD technology and high performance network connectivity, 25 gig, 50 gig, directly to the workstation. So this was the same thing that happened 7 years ago, 8 years ago with 4K, where all of a sudden it was, I got to have 10 gig to my desktop. It's like, well, now for color, we got to have 25 gig to our desktop to handle those heavy DPX and EXR workflows. But we're doing so in a truly shared fashion. We're not having to move the media, and that way we're saving a ton of time. We don't have to sit there and get the files down, get them all cached into the system before the client gets there. Just engage and hit spacebar and go to work on that side. So we're really bringing that same collaborative stuff into the higher resolutions now and the IOPS workflows that we've been bringing to wrap files and post for years.
And the other difficulty that people have also had with that whole workflow for the longest time has been, we're going to copy material overnight onto the system, and then we're going to get started in the color grading session at 8 a.m. You're still copying sometimes, and that makes a very sticky experience at the beginning of your session.
Yeah, or if you're even worse, if you were using something like a data verification tool that stopped the copy out because it had an error in the middle of the copy, and you realize you only got the first, half an hour of footage down as your client walks in the door, which becomes a, hey, have you seen our green room kind of moment.
I've been through those things where, someone says, well, what do I tell the client? And I've had to say, well, tell them to come back this afternoon. And no one likes having to have those particular discussions. So that's kind of that whole facility engineer. So let's get that hat on. And looking at the whole end-to-end workflow in media management, what is SNS doing to make people working inside of Resolve's lives easier?
Well, for the back end of the facility, there's so much because there's so much throughput that's going on. And that a color bay can swamp, quite frankly, your entire network, depending upon how it's designed. When that person engages, there's nothing else left. So by using a modular approach where we can mix SATA and SSD drives, for instance, or we can have multiple nodes connected to the switch to separate that performance so that when color engages, they're doing so against the appropriate set of disks over the appropriate connection, and not necessarily everyone trying to share this one big pool and hoping for some secret sauce or magic underneath that's migrating the data into the proper cache in real time and all of that. It just is where it is. And so from facilities management, we can either multi-connect. We have a lot of direct connect users that we can put into the back of a server. Like I can put 8 25 gig ports on the back of an Evo. So I don't need to go upgrade my whole switch infrastructure. I can direct connect colorist to these systems, and I can use the Evo, actually the Evo backplane, as a virtual switch. So I can create my own little edge network with one device to separate out that performance and keep it protected. I can also put things into a huge central core switch and distribute across that. But then we have the API automations through Slingshot, which now we can set up watch folders to migrate media seamlessly in the background between multiple nodes. So there's not as much media management going on. It's okay, this needs to be set for color, render your stuff here. It's automatically going to migrate. Facilities management or color assist is going to get an email and it's going to say, hey, the files are ready for color. Great. I don't have to worry about it. I'll also get an email if it fails. So if I do have that 8 a.m. situation you were talking about, I can get in there, at 6 a.m., which I've had to do before, and make sure we pick up where it left off. So the idea of giving us single buttons to move files from server to server against the backbone of the network via the API allows us to move that data more quickly, not tie up workstations while we're doing it. And really that same idea of I need to get more out of the same or less because of these high performance workflows that are coming in.
Very cool. And I was hearing that you had a pretty big product announcement this week. Do you want to give us a little bit of a tease of what's in this latest release?
Yeah, the neat thing is that that went out on Tuesday, I believe. So I don't have to tease you. Everything we talked about, everything we get to talk about here is kind of shipping in that regard. So what that does is it's a redesign for our share browser media asset management system, and it brings a lot of feature parity and an homogeneous look across all applications, all of our workflow extensions and workflow integrations, as well as our web app. So it provides parity there. It allows us to download things like proxies. It now ties into our Nomad remote workflow utility in a much more seamless way. It allows us to organize media. So that's something I'm really excited about. It gets kind of all the great features of Share Browser, but with a 2021 kind of facelift. It's got that light box, neutral gray look in the background instead of looking like the Mac Finder, or the Windows Explorer for the file system, and really lets you more seamlessly interact with the system. Another thing that got mentioned in that release here on the Resolve side is our workflow integration plugin for Resolve. So now, this is what I was alluding to earlier, Share Browser can be opened inside of Resolve. And I can simply export clips into my Resolve project from the Share Browser panel. So I can search across all tiers of storage. I can search across cloud archive spaces, LTO archive spaces, find everything. If I need to restore the file, I can do it all without ever leaving Resolve, much like I can move from editorial to compositing to audio sweetening to color, all within that Resolve interface as well. So for those creative users, you don't have to go into your file system anymore. Just live in your application. That's where we all want to be anyway.
Very cool. You guys have been keeping really busy so that we don't have to do all the busy work anymore on the production side in post. Cool. What I'm going to also need to do is at some time in the future get some time on your calendar to argue about baseball. But for now, we're going to bring Sean Carlson from Blackmagic back for our live Q&A. Please toss your questions into the chats now, YouTube, Facebook Live, or the Vimeo set up on our own website, and we will be back in a few seconds.